All right, I gave my footage to Jeff, and what he's going to do is put together a video about how this Alviso played out from each of our perspectives, and I'm just going to get into a little bit more details about how it played out from my end.
I like this pace.
Yeah, so we're just doing our neutral lap here, and this gives newcomers a chance to check out the course, and for the regulars to talk about, all the racing that happened over the weekend. And yeah, Jeff is just making sure that his GoPro is on. We had 18 riders show up today, which is about average for Alviso. Like sometimes they can get as like large as 40 or 50, and like that's like considered huge. And like other times, like typically in winter, I've seen it get down to about like 12 or 10 people, and that would be pretty like a light showing. But today it was pretty average, and also we had typical wind conditions. So let's just get into it. All right, so we just finished our neutral lap, and we're going to see here just in a second that Jeff and Blaine are both going to attack from the back of the field. And it took me a really long time to learn to not chase stuff like this down, and there's a few reasons for that. One is that it's really early on in the race. Two, they attack from the back of the field, and when you do that, they're going to have to pass like perhaps like a dozen guys, and there's a really high likelihood that one of those people up front is going to go and try to close that down, to try to chase that down. And me in the back, instead of having to ramp up to 1,000 watts or like 900 watts, I can just comfortably cruise into 600 watts, get behind this person's draft, and then we look around the corner and we can see that the field is still all together. Yeah, it's a practice crit, and they're really just trying to animate things to get this race started. And speaking of practice, this rider in the black and white kit and the blue helmet, he goes off solo here. And I have this controversial opinion that if you're going to be coming out to a practice crit regularly, I think everyone should try to do this solo off the front move at least once, if for no other reason than to just get it out of your system. Like the best that can happen is that you end up finding out that you're a time trialist, but I think most people will end up finding that it's not possible to overpower a field all alone by yourself. And it's just better that you kind of play with that and discover that early on, and then just don't do that at a real race. But this is a practice crit, and I'm thankful that this rider went off and did this because it creates this interesting scenario for us in the field where now we get to figure out, okay, how do we want to play this? And for me, my strategy was to stay as close as possible to the front so that I can kind of monitor things and see how things are playing out and possibly not miss any like cohesive chase groups if they did form, and in this case, they ended up not forming. And then to like not do any of the actual contribution and chasing myself. Okay, cut forward, and funnily enough, this rider ends up getting away, and it's because we've all been dawdling since apparently everyone had the exact same idea as me to not chase it down. So this Cortec rider finally decides that it's time to chase it down, so he jumps off, and meanwhile I'm thinking about how do I get back into the field. So I make this decision to hop across early to get onto this rider who just took a pull here. To get on his wheel because he's going to be going backwards. This Panvelo rider on the right is going to be moving forwards. And then, my plan here was to let others do the chasing because we're only 3 laps in, and there's still a lot of race left to go. All right, cut forward, and that rider's actually been brought back by a pretty relentless chase group. And sometimes what can happen when you have a chase group like that is that those sets of riders can end up becoming the next generation of brake riders. And so, yeah, Jeff notices that there's this group forming up the road, and so does Jerome. So both of these guys start putting in a pretty big dig, and I have to chase this down because this could end up becoming the move. If you look in the rear view camera, there's actually a pretty big gap forming between those of us who noticed that this group was forming and those who didn't. So there's something to be said about always staying vigilant within a race. And what ends up happening here is the group up the road, those guys start looking back to see, did we get caught? They see that Jeff is here, Jerome is here, so they start shutting it down, which allows the field behind us to actually catch up. And so every time I find myself in a situation where the group in front is slowing down, but I'm actually still carrying my momentum, I like to put in a little bit of a dig because I'm after one of two things. One is this forces everyone who slowed down to have to ramp back up, and so that softens up the field. The second thing is, if there's other riders who are also carrying their momentum, they might be able to hop across with you for relatively the same low effort. And what this does is that this could be the start of the next potential break. What ends up happening here is effectively everyone ends up having to do a little bit of work to try to catch up to me. This is pretty much the last move that I end up making for the first half of this race. I end up going dormant after this, so let's just fast forward. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure what's happening here, but I think Jeff is taunting Blaine, and there goes Blaine just attacking, and I guess I'm just thinking, sweet. All right, cut forward, and I've really just been in the back saving a lot of energy. And now I guess I have a lot of stock footage of riders from from behind, which doesn't really make for very interesting content. But so yeah, and you'll see I'm just coasting at 0 watts here. This rider whose wheel I'm about to be on in the red kit, his name is Dennis. He's going to be important later because he's the person that I end up ultimately breaking with a little bit later. But, up until this point, you'll see in Jeff's video that he and Thirsty Bear have just been attacking each other. And meanwhile, I'm just thinking about when do I want to start making my moves. And Blaine taught me this. Blaine comes here, so let's just hold that thought. Blaine attacks, and then I realize, okay, now I want to start playing. And he's going. I like bridging with Blaine because he's also a breakaway rider, kind of like myself. And he does something good here. He stops pedaling after he looks back and sees that I'm with him. And then I come around, and then he gets on my wheel. And this is a really great way where we're both going to be able to efficiently use our energy to start to establish the early beginnings of a break group. And we passed this rider on the orange bike, and unfortunately he wasn't looking back. What I would have liked to have seen him done earlier was to see that we were coming up, and then he ramps up his speed so that he could latch on to either my wheel or Blaine's wheel, and then we could have picked him up as a third rider. But he missed that chance, so now he's back in the field. And I flicked Blaine through. He does his pull. He's doing a good effort. I only have to do 150, 300 watts to stay in his draft. And we're still maintaining this gap. And sometimes when this kind of stuff happens, the field starts looking at each other to see, okay, who's going to bridge up. And this is where we can really start to establish a pretty good time gap. But then here we get brought back. And it's Dennis. Yeah, so then Dennis comes around, and what's happening right now, sorry for the rear view camera, is Blaine attacks again, and now Dennis reacted quickly and hopped onto that wheel. And this is a super sensitive situation because now you have Jeff, who's forced to chase Blaine, and then now you got Matt from Tarun Elite also up the road. And Jerome has me pincered here because he knows that he has no obligation to chase and that he could get a free ride from me. But fortunately, what happens here is that everyone actually starts slowing down, but it could have really gone the opposite way where they all hit the gas and they all start to disappear really quickly from me if I wasn't in a position to be able to jump in and react to that. And I think why it played out this way here is because everyone is really tired. And this is what Blaine taught me long ago about how to read the field and kind of read the situation. It doesn't come across very well through GoPros or action cams because when you're in the actual field, you're able to kind of look at each of the different riders to see, okay, are they suffering? Are they tired? And I remember this situation looking around and remembering, yeah, people are starting to get a little bit gassed. So that's reading the field, and the time to attack is when people start slowing down because they're tired. Okay, so before we talk about the move, let's rewind really quick and see this rider on the white bike to the left here. He's moving up. His name's Ben, and see, he's also reading the situation. So he's coming from the back of the field and moving up because he's ready to attack as well. So here I go, peeling off to the left. I did it a little bit differently than how Ben and Dennis did it. But here my goal was, I saw these two riders braking from the front of the break, and instead of shooting through at 1,000 watts, I can't do 1,000 watts, to establish a huge break, I decided to actually tone it down to 600 watts because I wanted to make a nice gentle space shuttle docking on the International Space Stations where it's a smooth landing, a smooth contact, where I really wanted Ben to get onto my wheel gently and then only start committing a lot of energy once the actual break group has actually come together. And see, now you start to see me do 300 watts, 400 watts, which means Ben, who's in front of me, is doing a lot more than that. But now that we've all come together, now is the time that we all start pitching in so that we can get away from the field. So I guess the takeaway there is don't blow riders off your wheel when you're first trying to establish a break. Or put differently, don't blow me off your wheel, man. I'm doing y'all a solid. Okay, so right as I say that, if you look in the rear view cam, Dennis is looking back and he's looking back again, and he shoots off for here. And it was just my turn. Ben just flicked me through, and man, dude, Dennis is just getting away. He is not happy with this pace. He's looking back, And I was just thinking to myself, I spent so much time trying to time this move. And, luckily this rider comes around and he helps bridge it back to Dennis. So I'm just having to do like a nice, man, it's like 150 watts, 200 watts, dude. It's like so awesome. But, I just didn't panic. And, I guess by playing possum a little bit, I was able to get somebody else to come around. And now we're almost back to Dennis and things are good again. Yeah, so now it's my turn for reels this time, and I'm just putting in a small 400 watt dig here just to keep the pace high. This is the crosswind section, so you got to do a lot more power. But the key is that I'm doing my part here in the break, and yeah, I'm pretty sure this is super obvious to a lot of people, but this is really just how to be in a break 101, and I just recently printed my certificate and having graduated it, so yeah. So anyway, let's look in the rear view cam, and something cool happens here. Blaine actually is bridging up with another rider. I wish I knew who he was in the white kit. But yeah, see, so Blaine bridges up. Unfortunately, the rider in white doesn't make it, and dude, I know how that feels. I've had that happen to me so many times that Wednesday night crit. But then if you also looked in the review cam just now, as Ben finishes his rotation, Blaine actually swoops all the way to the right, and that allows him to hide from Ben's peripheral view, and then allows him to slot right behind Ben, which gives Blaine the opportunity to skip one more pull, which is something that he should do because he just spent a lot of time and energy trying to bridge up. Unfortunately, it was at this point that we learned that Ben actually dropped off, so now it's really just me, this rider in the black kit, Dennis, and Blaine. And if you noticed, he actually tried skipping another pull again, but then something funny happens here. Dennis actually shoots off again at the same point, and he, now he's really frustrated looking back, hey, get on my wheel, he's telling us. And, I had just done my pull, and I guess I'm starting to become one of those guys that just clocks out when my shift is done. So I stop pedaling, and this actually gets Blaine to come around, and then he...
Trying to lose, come on! I just worked!
Yeah, neither of us were wrong. It was also at this point that the rider in black fell off. Alright, so we've been rotating nicely up until this point, and I've just been checking back frequently to make sure that the field hasn't caught up, and I think by this point I felt pretty safe that we were in the clear, but I still had a lot of PTSD from the week before where Jeff knit me out the line. So, I just really was trying to figure out how do I actually want to win this one, and I think I read in a pamphlet somewhere at one point that being third wheel in a break when you're with three other guys is a pretty good position, so I figured I'll just trust that pamphlet. And so I'm just letting wheels go, Blaine's going through, and Dennis should have probably come all the way behind me, but yeah, he just slotted in because I'm just trying really hard to be third wheel. Yeah, I'm gonna have to double check to make sure that that was a cycling pamphlet. Yeah, so anyway, we're riding pretty slow because I think all three of us size each other up for having pretty similar sprints, and when people are of equal fitness value like this, whoever goes first is very unlikely to win. And long story short, that's just how drafting works. So Dennis actually goes first. He kicks up. I actually touch 1,000 watts, which is super duper rare for me. But then after Dennis kicks, he actually slows down a bit, and I realize, okay, this has to be my chance where I can come around while I still have my momentum, and that's kind of the benefit of being the last wheel in this break of three. And I come around Blaine, then we all just try to uncork. Jeff can usually hit 42. I'm really happy that I just hit 38. And yeah, that was my first Alviso. I promised the 38's coming right there. Yeah, so a lot of my results come from breaks, and I pedal through here because you just never know how much the other guys have got left, at the end. And I actually have some footage here from Andrew, who had a mechanical. So this was kind of cool. This doesn't always happen, but this allowed me to see what the time gap looked like between the break and then the chasing group and then the field. And when I counted down, just kind of using the street lights, I counted about 26 seconds was the gap. So you can kind of see here what that 20 seconds gap looks like. And it's not much, but also a ton when you look at it. And so when Andrew zooms out here, you'll be able to see just how much distance we had on the field. Anyway, those penguins took forever to Photoshop, so you're gonna have to tell me, do you think it's the SJBC penguin, the Taroom penguin, or the Thirsty Bear penguin that's the most aero looking?